Should we start, Swagata ma'am?
Hindu?
Admin sir, please remove the slide so that we can start our webinar today.
आगे से अंदर रखो।
125 आ चुके हैं मैम।
त्याला काय किती घेऊ
Swagata, should we start?
वेबिनार है। केपी सिंह ने लिंक भेजा था तो एक दिन इसको कैसे म्यूट करके, हाँ ये चश्मा नया है ना, ये बहुत अच्छा है। मैंने म्यूट
Madam, please start the webinar.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Myself, Dr. Durgeshwari Shah from BLP Government PG College, Mohun. It's a matter of immense pleasure for us that today we are organizing a webinar on the crucial theme, combating non-traditional threats from China like COVID-19. It's a matter of proud for us that today we are having retired Brigadier Mr. Rajmani Kannan as a keynote speaker. Today we are also having our Additional Director of Indoor Division, Dr. Suresh Roberts, who is due to unavoidable reason is not at present being with us. He will join us later. So it is our duty to offer our worship to Goddess Saraswati Devi before starting any program. So may I request to Dr. Swagata ma'am to offer a prayer for the Saraswati. Over to Swagata ma'am. Am I audible, Swagata ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
या कुन्देन्दु तुषारहार धवला या शुभ्रवस्त्रावृता या वीणावरदण्डमण्डितकरा या श्वेतपद्मासना या ब्रह्मा सा मां पातु सरस्वती भगवती निःशेषजाड्यापहा
Thank you, Swagata ma'am. Now, may I request for inaugural speech Dr. S.M. Salim, HOD, Department of Military Science. Sir, over to you. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah. You are audible, ma'am.
Sir, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Here, myself, Dr. S.M. Salim, Professor and Head, Department of Military Science at Dharulal Patidar Government PG College, Mau. I heartily welcome you all in this national webinar on combating non-traditional threats from China like COVID-19.
हाँ
All
बिल्कुल बाद में न बुझाई है नो अभी तो बुझात नहीं क्यों करा बेचारी लेके आके धुन में देखिए ऑपरेशन शरीर कर दे
yes.
हाँ
Thank you all for joining us. Today's lecture for today's webinar will be delivered by our chief guest, retired Brigadier Rajmani Kannan sir. Before we get started, I would like to thank Dr. Suresh Silawat sir, Honorable Additional Director, Higher Education, Indore Division, and Principal Dr. Shobha Jain ma'am, and our energetic Nodal Officer, Dr. Swagata Gupta ma'am, for their valuable motivation and support. Without further delay, I would like to hand over further proceedings to Dr. Durgeshwari Shah ma'am, convener for today's webinar. Thank you all, dear participants. Over to Dr. Durgeshwari Shah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay. Now, may I request our principal, Dr. Shobha Jain, madam, for giving welcoming note in the honor of our keynote speaker, Brigadier Rajmani Kannan sir, and our AD, Honorable Dr. Suresh Silawat sir. Over to Shobha Jain, ma'am, please.
सभी को नमस्कार।
नमस्कार।
राष्ट्र रक्षा सर्वोपरि इस शीर्षक के अंतर्गत कोविड-19 के समान चीन के परंपरागत संकटों का सामना इस विषय पर आयोजित इस वेबिनार के लिए मैं सर्वप्रथम सैन्य विज्ञान विभाग को बधाई देते हुए मैं हृदय से अभिनंदन करती हूँ। आज के हमारे जो प्रमुख वक्ता हैं, जो विषय विशेषज्ञ हैं, जो अनुभव के धनी हैं, भारतीय सेना में जिनका एक लंबा अनुभव है, आदरणीय ब्रिगेडियर राजमणि कन्नन सर का, जो अपने महत्वपूर्ण अनुभवों से आज इस विषय पर प्रकाश डालेंगे और हम सभी का ज्ञानवर्धन करेंगे। हम सब ने सुना है, हम सब जानते हैं, कहते भी हैं, जननी जन्मभूमिश्च स्वर्गादपि गरीयसी। माता और मातृभूमि ये दोनों स्वर्ग से भी महान है और इन दोनों की रक्षा करना हमारा परम कर्तव्य है। जैसा कि प्रसिद्ध श्लोक है, राष्ट्र रक्षा समम पुण्यम, राष्ट्र रक्षा समम व्रतम, राष्ट्र रक्षा समा यज्ञः, दृष्टो नैव च नैव च। इसलिए राष्ट्र रक्षा हमारे लिए सर्वोपरि है और इस राष्ट्र रक्षा में हमारे भारतीय सैनिकों की महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका होती है और उस महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका को आदरणीय कन्नन सर ने निर्वहन किया है। आज जब हम उनके मुख से उनके अनुभवों के साथ राष्ट्र सुरक्षा कैसे की जाए, विशेष रूप से कोविड-19 जैसे चीन के गैर परंपरागत जो संकट हमारे सामने आया है, तो हम वर्तमान में कैसे उससे सुरक्षा कर रहे हैं और भविष्य में इस तरह के यदि और अन्यान्य संकट उपस्थित होते हैं तो हमारे देश की क्या नीति रहेगी, क्या भविष्य की क्या योजनाएं रहेंगी, इस विषय पर विस्तार से प्रकाश डालने के लिए हमारे बीच जिनका सानिध्य हमें प्राप्त हुआ है, ऐसे विद्वान विशेषज्ञ श्री ब्रिगेडियर कन्नन सर का मैं हृदय से अभिनंदन करती हूँ, अभिवादन करती हूँ। मैं अभिनंदन करती हूँ जो अपरिहार्य कारण से आज के हमारे वेबिनार में सम्मिलित नहीं हो पाए, इंदौर संभाग के उच्च शिक्षा विभाग के अतिरिक्त संचालक डॉक्टर सुरेश जी सिलावट का और समस्त प्रतिभागी गण का, जो भारत के अलग अलग प्रदेशों से इस वेबिनार में सम्मिलित हो रहे हैं, उन समस्त प्रतिभागियों का भी मैं स्वागत करती हूँ और बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं देती हूँ महाविद्यालय के सैन्य विज्ञान विभाग के विभागाध्यक्ष डॉक्टर SM सलीम सर को, जिनके समन्वय में डॉक्टर दुर्गेश्वरी शाह मैडम जो आज की संयोजिका हैं, डॉक्टर मीना यादव मैडम, डॉक्टर वास्केल सर, इन सभी का मैं बहुत बहुत बधाई देती हूँ इन सभी को। और इसके साथ ही पूरी आयोजन समिति को, उपाध्याय सर, हमारे अर्चना जैन मैडम, रशीदा कांचवाला मैडम, रेखा वर्मा मैडम और वर्ल्ड बैंक की विशेष रूप से जो समर्पित हमारी मैडम है स्वागता गुप्ता मैडम, सभी को मैं बहुत बहुत हृदय से अभिनंदन करती हूँ, स्वागत देती हूँ, बधाई देती हूँ और वेबिनार की सफलता के लिए बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं देती हूँ। एक छोटी सी बात और करना चाहती हूँ कि विजय में दो चीजें बहुत महत्वपूर्ण हो। विजय ज्ञानेन शौर्येण, केवल वीरता भी काम नहीं करती और केवल ज्ञान भी काम नहीं करता। जब दोनों का संगम हो जाता है तो विजय की प्राप्ति आसानी से हो जाती है। मैं पुनः कन्नन सर का हृदय से अभिनंदन करती हूँ, स्वागत करती हूँ और दुर्गेश्वरी मैडम को माइक सौंपती हूँ। धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद मैडम। Thank you, madam, for your encouraging, motivational, and unconditional support. We know you are always with us. Okay, thank you, ma'am. Now, over to Mohammad Yusuf for the introduction of our keynote speaker, Brigadier Rajmani Kannan, sir. Over to Yusuf. Yusuf, am I audible?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Very good afternoon to one and all. Myself, Mohammad Yusuf. I will give a brief introduction of our chief guest, Brigadier Rajmani Kannan. Brigadier Rajmani Kannan was commissioned into the Regiment of Artillery on 15 December 1984. After graduating from National Defence Academy and the Indian Military Academy, he was commissioned into a specialist artillery regiment which had its gun mounted on tanks and thus has served with armored formation in the desert and semi-desert terrain. He had varied experience in operation, logistic, instructional and staff appointment. He has served in Ambala, Sikkim, Devlali, Hisar as a commanding officer, Wellington, Bikaner, Pune, Kolkata, Ladakh as a brigade commander, Mahu and Bathinda. He has also served as an instructor in the Indian military training team in Bhutan. Among us, the important career courses, he has done the long gunnery staff course in Devlali, Defence Staff Service Colleges and Wellington, and High Command course in Maho. He developed interest on China by virtue of his posting to Sikkim, Bhutan, Kolkata, Ladakh. He thereafter has submitted his PhD thesis on Chinese Threat 2025 has progressed in March 2020 under the guidance of Professor R.K. Patidar and Professor Dr. S.M. Salim and is awaiting the Viva. He retired from Army 31st December 2019. Thank you. Now I over to the further process to the Dr. Kothari Madam.
Okay, thank you, Yusuf. Now, we know during this COVID-19 crisis, there are so many threats posed by our neighbor countries and especially from the China. Before handing over to the Kannan sir, there are so many threats like cyber attacks, border disputes since 1950 when China asserted Tibet. But still, there are so many things. Without delaying, I will like to hand over the floor to Kannan sir. Over to you, sir. Sir, are you hearing me?
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Please proceed, sir.
Could my slide be screened? Ma'am, can you enable my slide sharing? Swagata, ma'am.
You are audible, sir?
No, audible. My slide sharing has not been.
Having problem with slide presentation.
Yeah.
So is it okay now?
Are you seeing the slides?
No. You haven't shared it yet, sir.
Yeah, just. Okay now?
Yeah. Yes, sir. It is visible now. Sir, please make it full screen.
Yeah, it's full screen now.
Yeah, it's okay. Fine, sir.
Okay. Good afternoon to one and all. It's a unique opportunity for me to be speaking on this topic of combating non-traditional threats by China. I want to firstly at the outset express my gratitude to Mohammad Yusuf for sharing the thoughts about me. And I want to thank the chief patron, Dr. Silawat, the principal of the school, Dr. Shobha Jain, and my coordinator for the PhD, Dr. Salim, and for him, especially for giving me this opportunity to speak on this webinar. And I also want to thank the convener, Dr. Durgeshwari Shah, ma'am. Why did we pick up this topic of non-traditional threat from China? Before I go ahead, I would request all participants to please switch off their video and audio so that the bandwidth doesn't become an issue. So the participants are requested to please switch off their video and mute themselves. Okay, why did we pick up this topic? We were all aware of the conventional threats. And when I say conventional, it means putting boots on ground, use of aircrafts, use of missiles, and all that. So now we are talking about threats which will not use any of these weapon systems and will be able to subdue the enemy without them. So when I say non-traditional, you can even equate it with unconventional threats. So, and these unconventional threats are what are going to be unfolding in the future. And why are we linking it to COVID-19? So this is ongoing threat. So we thought it will be good to draw a parallel from COVID-19 and equate it as to how we can take it forward for other kind of threats. I've divided my webinar into 4 parts as shown: threat indicators, thresholds, and response, and capability building. So why did I divide it into these 4 parts? Primarily because this is how in the army or in the defense services, we approach a particular problem as far as the enemy is concerned. When you talk of threat indicators, this can be at various levels, starting from the government, which can be looking at the political indicators, the statements by the adversaries, diplomatic indicators, and so on, and then coming down to the strategic and the operational level indicators, and the tactical indicators will be physical movement of troops on ground. So that is how the indicators are there for a conventional threat. So as we move along, we'll see what would be the indicators or what were the indicators in the case of COVID-19. And the thresholds for various actions. So based on these indicators, we arrive at the thresholds. Thresholds can be equated to be tolerance. So when you say a threshold, we say, okay, if I have to take a particular action and if the enemy is reaching a particular point, then I have to pass my orders in a particular time so that by the time the enemy reaches point B, my troops are ready. So why I'm equating this to conventional operations, so it becomes easier to correlate. So
अब तो अनम्यूट करना है ना?
Yeah, please mute. Okay, so just to draw another example, if the enemy is reaching bridge 1 and he is supposed to cross to bridge 2, and I want to use the space between bridge 1 and 2 as my killing area. So when the enemy crosses bridge 1, I will pass my orders so that by the time the majority of the forces is between bridge 1 and 2, I can have my artillery or my missiles deployed and be ready to fire on the enemy by the time he is effective between bridge 1 and 2. So that is the kind of action the government will have to take even for non-traditional threats, by finding out the thresholds for each type of non-traditional threat. And based on these threshold is the response. Like in this case, I said my response was to use guns and missiles. So a response for a non-traditional threat is going to be different based on how the government perceives the threshold, what is the tolerance level the government is willing to accept for a non-traditional threat. And fourth is capability building. So capability building for is a fallout of the type of response that you want. For want of a capability, a particular response may not be able to be executed, because capability building takes time. So as a nation, when you have to build a capability for any type of response, you have to ensure that your capability is in place. So this becomes a very essential component of combating any non-traditional threat. And so final outcome is going to be what are the capabilities that need to be built and how much of time that capability building will take. All right. So just a little prelude. We are all aware of the growth of China of the last 4 decades, from the time Deng Xiaoping started his revolutions. From 1978 to 1992 was a big growth chart for China. The GDP of China in 1978 was 15,000 crores US dollars. And today in 2019, it is 14 lakh crores, almost 100 times increase in its GDP. Today, it has got a forex reserve of 3.3 trillion US dollars, whereas India has 473 billion US dollars as of January 2020. So this gives a lot of clout to China by virtue of its single-minded economic progress that it has made, which it can exercise and which it is exercising today, as we are seeing all around the globe. Second aspect is the rise of Xi Jinping. The process by which he became a president is still a mystery. In 2007, he suddenly got catapulted to the Politburo Standing Committee. And then in 2008, he became the vice premier. And by the time he had become the vice premier, China's economy had already progressed to a level where it was overtaking Japan to be the world's second biggest economy in terms of GDP. In 2013, of course, he became the president, and he's only the second person after Mao Zedong to hold all 3 posts of being the head of the state, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, and the Central Military Commission. So he is wielding a lot of power. And in March 2008, he got the constitution, 2018, sorry, he got the constitution amended to nullify the 10-year term the president has to serve. So now Xi Jinping can serve as long as he wants and fulfill all his China dream that he wanted to. So with this, you can see that he is exercising his might in the South China Sea. The one China policy is non-negotiable. In fact, when Donald Trump took over, he tried to belittle the one China policy, and then he had to take back his words and acknowledge that one China policy will be the cornerstone of all future US and Chinese interactions. The Belt and Road Initiative is another flagship project of Xi Jinping, and it's a very nuanced project where, though it is infrastructure or economy related, that's a way by which Xi Jinping has decided to reach out to the various countries across the globe, starting from South Asia, Southeast Asia, Africa, and even now Europe, so that the Chinese presence is felt in all parts of the world. So that is how now Xi Jinping in future also is likely to exercise his power because of the constitutional and the economic power that has been vested in him. I feel that neighbors and parents are God's gift. If you are staying in a rented house, okay, you can shift out and change your neighbor. But if you're owning a house, who is your neighbor is not in your hands. Similar is the case with the parents. So we have to live with them. So I firmly believe that now that we have a neighbor like Pakistan, we have a neighbor like China, there is no way that we can tell USA to come and occupy China's place or China to go and sit in USA's place. So if you look at a long-term horizon of, say, another 50 years, or say by 2050, despite what is going on now in the LAC and the relationship going down, ultimately we have to look at ways to come around and stay together. In fact, I believe that if Russia, India, and China are able to come together, being the two fastest growing economies, that is India and China, and half of the almost world's population being on this side of the globe, we'll be able to make a big difference to the world. But this needs a lot of work in progress. China's interest in non-kinetic means of warfare has been going on for about 2 decades in its academic, military, and political circles. And it involves economic, information, legal, and psychological aspects. The Belt and Road Initiative is one such economic warfare, I would say, where China is actually giving out large loans and debts to other countries and making them dependent on them. And once they are not able to pay the loan, then obviously China starts exercising control over their political and diplomatic aspects. And of course, they do gain access to use their territory for any military means in the future. As far as the information is concerned, the print and the even audiovisual media in China is completely under the control of the CCP. And what China gives out is primarily what they want to tell and not what you want to hear. So China has got its own narrative, and it makes sure that everyone hears the same. As far as the legal aspect is concerned, China is presently focusing a lot on the legal warfare aspect. So it wants to take a narrative that what it is doing is legally right. It is only claiming its rightful place. It suffered a century of humiliation from 1879 to 1849 to 1949. And now what it is doing is only to regain its position. So it wants to justify legally any action that it is taking, whether it be South China Sea or with respect to Taiwan, with respect to Hong Kong. So it's saying that it is legally correct and it's moral right to take such actions. And all these, of course, have a bearing on the psychology of the target country. So this has been encapsulated as a 3 warfare strategy, 3W strategy, which primarily includes media, psychological warfare, and legal warfare. All these 3 actually have an interplay amongst each other. Each gives fodder to the other. So when you have a media aspect coming up, a particular press report coming up, it will have psychological and legal impacts. But final impact is certainly psychological, whether it is on the political hierarchy of the target country, whether it is in the military or even on the common public. So the complete strategy is aimed at undermining the adversary's organizational foundations and targets the military morale. I won't limit it to military morale. Actually, it can go beyond the military morale and impact even the common man, so that the common man is also made to believe that, yes, what China is doing is right and what my country is doing is wrong. So that is the kind of impact that China wants to have against its adversaries. So thus, there is a need for us to focus on the non-traditional threats. When I say non-traditional, it includes basically non-conventional, where you're not using weapons, but you're planning to subdue. Now let's have a look as to what could be this non-traditional threat. So it could be diplomatic, economic, domination of the LAC, as we are seeing happening in the Ladakh region, cyber electronic space war for GW. So this, all these common factor in all of these is that it will have impact across domains, multidimensional impact. It will not only impact a particular ministry or a particular aspect of life, but will impact multidimensional. We'll see more of it as we move along. Biological is now got added to the list. So there is the Biological Weapons Convention, which was signed on 26th March 1975. India became a signatory in July 74, and China joined in November 1984. As per this convention, the countries are supposed to inform about the outbreak of any infectious diseases or even development of any toxins or vaccines, and any such action which they have taken related to health hazards. Now, whether China has done it in this case or not is debatable. So thus it will emerge in the future as we hear about more investigation going on to the manner in which China has reported about COVID-19. It will become clear to us as to whether it was indeed a deliberate threat by China, or in this particular case, it was not. Right. So having seen the types of non-traditional threats, we will get back to COVID-19. So what were the indicators that were available? I'm just highlighting a few of them. These are all available in the open domain. So on 31st December, China reported about the pneumonia with unknown cause to World Health Organization. Whether China suffered this pandemic just a few days before it reported to WHO, or like in some reports, it is emerging that China had this problem right from September, but it reported only in December. So these are issues which will emerge. So if it had actually not reported earlier, yes, it can be held against China that it was hiding and the biological weapon convention was not being followed. So it was sort of a deliberate attempt by China to distort the world with this pandemic. And as you can see, within 17 days, it has spread to all countries across the world, starting from Australia in the east to US in the west. And on 30th January, the World Health Organization declared this as a public health emergency. And by this time, China had more than 5,000 cases. And India got the first case on 30th January when one of the students had returned back from Wuhan. The government at that time said that it had the quarantine facilities in place. But whether actually the quarantine facilities were in place fully is something that is a subject of debate, because as we know, further quarantine facilities had to be created in a large scale as the disease progressed. On 1st February, the number of cases in China increased to 14,380, and India evacuated 324 people, citizens from Wuhan. And on 3rd February, the WHO launched its dashboard, and India continued to evacuate 330 people more from Wuhan. And WHO on 11th February 2019 gave the name of this disease at COVID-19 because it's a coronavirus. There are two types of viruses, coronavirus and rhinovirus. So this is a form of coronavirus, and ID number 19. So COVID-19 was the name which was given for this particular disease. 15th March, India achieved a landmark of crossing 100 patients. 15th March, Africa, 26 countries reported 273 cases. And 218 Indians were brought back, firstly from Italy and then 230 from Iran. Italy was badly affected during that time. On 22nd March, the globe surpassed 3 lakh cases. So as the Prime Minister in his, and that is the date when the Janata curfew was imposed by the Prime Minister. On 24th March, just 2 days later, the globe crossed the 4 lakh mark. So in 2 days, we moved from 3 lakhs to 4 lakhs. And even in India's case, if you see from 403, we went to 571, almost a 40% increase. And so the lockdown was announced, which was extended first till 31st May. But the government obviously said that from 14th March onwards, it had started designating labs for testing, importing of kits. It revised protocols for testing as the COVID-19 moved along. It started producing PPEs. All these activities were then happening concurrently. On 19th May, India reached 1 lakh. So starting from 30th January, so where it was a one case, we took about 2 months to reach the 1 lakh mark. And the lockdown continued till our 1st of June. Now what happened on 2nd of June, we are at 2 lakh, but unlock 1 starts. So why this contradiction? So now that is a threshold. So the government realized that this kind of a lockdown cannot continue. The economy cannot sustain. So despite the pandemic going up, the unlock started. So which means this is something which is one of the thresholds which need to be thought out and maybe planned out in a better manner. On 17 July, we reached 10 lakh cases. On 6th August, we reached 20 lakh cases. And as we speak today, we are almost at 27 lakhs. We are today adding 60,000 plus cases a day, which is about 1 lakh in 2 days. So maybe by the end of August, we would be at 35 lakhs, and America is about 55 as of now. So we are fast catching up. And this is happening when your public transport system has not opened. Once the public transport system opens, you have buses flying, you have trains flying, we will have maybe a far number of cases, and we can only hope that the government machinery is in place to handle the exponential increase of cases for treating them in various hospitals. So these timelines are the ones which give us an idea as to the government should identify these various thresholds. And this is basically numbers. Now, whether this is enough or not, we'll see as we move along. But surprisingly, one point which I would like to make is China still says it's got only about 84,000 cases, while the world is trotting along with lakhs and lakhs of cases. So it may be a big pointer to China that it has got USA and India, two of its closest competitors, embroiled in this COVID-19. USA is already number one in terms of the affected country. India is slowly catching up, just Brazil in between, and India is also affected badly. So one is the country to which China is catching up. It will want to overtake or subdue. And next is India, which wanted to catch up. And it is the only counterweight which the world considers against China in this part of the world. So it is able to now subdue, India also, by virtue of the number of cases that are spreading and the manner in which it is spreading. So has actually China achieved its aim by subduing USA and India is again a matter of debate. So we were talking of thresholds. Okay, so when I talk of thresholds, again, I will draw a parallel to the military. So like when we have an enemy, and each one has got a different threshold. All institutions, all ministries will not have the same threshold in terms of the impact that it can cause. Like the third bullet says capacity of hospital. So this was a major impact. Like if a hospital for say has got a capacity of 500 beds, and in a normal environment without COVID-19, the number of patients it was holding was say 200 to 250. And suddenly once COVID started, the hospital bed occupancy went up to 300 to 350. So now it gives it an indicator, okay, that means having reached 350, is there a need now to increase my hospital bed capacity? Similarly, is the commitment of the health and sanitation workers working 8 hours a day, but suddenly the pressure is building up, number of patients going up. So are we having enough workers, or do we need to employ more by contract and things like that? So these are various, each ministry therefore has to work out the threshold, like the economy, the way it is, and how much of impact can the economy take without further production and without anybody going to work is a threshold figure that needs to be worked out by the government. And maybe working backwards, they need to issue orders in, I would say, bits and pieces, and not say the way we did the lockdown this time, and everything came to a standstill and people weren't actually ready for it. So maybe even the lockdown could have been implemented in a phased manner if your thresholds were clearly nuanced and they knew that what is going to happen. Ideally, there should not be a single loss of life in non-kinetic threat, because you're not firing a missile, you're not firing any weapons. But in this kind of an attack where there is a biological weapon, I would say, or say in the future a chemical weapon, a loss of life would be inevitable. But in any other non-traditional threat, like I had listed out, that loss of life cannot be accepted. If any, the loss of life would be a subsidiary fallout by virtue of a particular industry shutting down, people not able to go to work, some people dying of starvation, or somebody due to mental conditions committing suicide. So those are subsidiary issues. But in this case, there is a direct impact where a loss of life is taking place due to the threat itself. So ultimately, it's a race between the rate of spread and the readiness of the medical fraternity in terms of the kind of equipment that it has to deal with this type of a pandemic, to deal with this kind of a threat. So that is why, like I said, so this implementation of the lockdown, whether it has achieved its aims of having the medical fraternity to be ready in full, or still we are lagging behind, There are certain aspects that we all know are still, we are lagging behind, but in terms of ventilators and ICUs is still a question, because like I said, the economy is not fully opened up. We are still controlling, and when we say unlock, but still there is a certain lock in place. So once the lock opens fully, are we ready is what is the question mark. So the implementation of the lockdown being successful is a debatable issue. Coming down to response, like I said, that a non-traditional threat is multidimensional. Though this particular threat of COVID was technically a biological threat, a medical threat, but look at the kind of impact it has had across everybody's life, across all the ministries. Who could have imagined that we are going to have a webinar sitting and speaking on this kind of a topic rather than sitting in a hall and everybody listening and interactive participation. And so an education department has got impacted to a large extent because of a medical threat. So that is the multidimensional impact that a non-traditional threat will have. So the response in this particular case would have involved policies on social distancing, personal hygiene, and all that I've listed there. You can read it, catering for medical equipment and daily wages and below poverty line people. So the huge issue about this migrant labor that we saw is maybe one thing that I would say a fallout of not having thought through the whole thing. And if we had a plan in mind, maybe this would have been factored in, and the kind of scenes that we saw on our TV sets. So these could have been avoided. And even we are, this particular aspect is not limited to viewing only in India. The whole world is watching, and India is now claiming to be a regional power. And so this kind of situation should be avoided, and it should be thought through. Any kind of a non-traditional threat, the response has to be thought through. We also obviously had to work on law enforcement, because you had a lockdown and people are not used to this kind of a lockdown. So the law enforcement agencies had to be in place to make sure that people abide by the rules. Another very sensitive subject was the disposal of the dead. While the hygiene aspect and the medical aspect is fully understood, for the government, it may be a statistical number. But as far as the family is concerned, it is a huge loss. It's a big loss to the family in terms of a earning member or any dear person. So there has to be protocol in place where the family members should be able to participate while the government is able to dispose of the cremate or bury in terms of the COVID-19 regulations. So again, you need to have protocols in place beforehand. And these are issues which can be actually documented beforehand, and you don't have to have a COVID-19 attack coming to you to then think as to what is to be done. So like I mentioned earlier, the threat was not economic, but it had a huge economic impact because it impacted human lives. So the moment you have a non-traditional threat impacting human lives physically or even psychologically, so there will be a fallout on other dimensions. Another aspect that I would like to add is, in this particular case, the government maybe had an advantage of having a huge majority, and you have a prime minister and a home minister who are not afraid of taking strong and fast decisions. But this may not be the case every time. So that is why, irrespective of the type of government which is in place, you need to document the response. And the response has to be available in the ministries for any government to act, so that the response is available with the bureaucrats, it's available with the state governments, and they're able to act irrespective of who is in power and waiting for specific orders. And these kind of responses to be worked out based on extreme situations of each type of threat, whether it is diplomatic, economic, or cyber. There is a good book written by Raja Mohan on a long view from Delhi, India's foreign policy. This was written in 2010, and it looked at a 10-year perspective, and it said what should be done if the scenario is negative, that is, if relations with China improve, and what should be done if the scenario is positive, that is, the relations improve and relations don't improve. So it takes both these extreme situations. So similar analysis needs to be done for various types of threats, so that the government is able to formulate their policies as to how to go about in this manner. How this documentation can be done. This is just a recommendation. There could be many ways in which the documentation can be done. Ultimately, the nodal agency is the Cabinet Committee on Security. the Prime Minister is the chairman of the Cabinet Committee on Security. He has the Finance Minister, the Home Minister, the External Affairs Minister, and the Defense Minister as part of the members of the Cabinet Committee on Security. But they are very busy people, so they won't be able to handle this kind of analysis by themselves. So they need to entrust this to various government departments or institutions, and they need to wargame each of these scenarios of these non-traditional threats. I'm posing non-kinetic also, because all these threats are actually non-kinetic threats. So like in the defense services, we have war games every year. We have war games at the brigade, divisional, corps level, and we revise our plans so that you can evaluate them or draw lessons from them as to what needs to be changed, what infrastructure needs to be built, what force needs to be added on. So those kind of decisions are taken based on the war games. Similarly, at the command level and the army headquarters level, the war games are there where participation is there. So a similar kind of a environment needs to be built up for these non-traditional threats. So one of the options is also standing parliamentary committees, but the need is to discuss across the ministries for each type of threat. Like we have seen the impact that COVID has had. Every ministry of the Indian government has got impacted. So you cannot take inputs only from the health ministry, which would have then said, okay, as long as I have enough PPE, as long as I have enough of ICUs or ventilator beds, I am good to go. But that is not the case. Just by the health ministry being prepared may not help us in combating this COVID-19 threat. So the discussion across the ministries is a very essential aspect. And these findings will have to be presented to the Cabinet Committee on Security. And once approved, the document is to be put into a standing operating procedure. And we need to also nominate a specific ministry for each type of threat. Because in this particular situation, we are saying the briefing is being done by a health secretary and not the national security advisor. So if it is a threat, it is the national security advisor who should be briefing, giving an update on a daily basis, but that's not the case. So each ministry will have to take control or take ownership of the standing operating procedure for the different types of non-traditional threats. So we also have something called the China Study Group. The China Study Group was constituted in 1975, and the former president K.R. Narayanan, he was the first chairman of the China Study Group. China Study Group started taking active interest along the northern borders from say 2000, and they recommended a lot of infrastructure changes, force accretions and all that for the northern borders facing China. So, but whether China Study Group can take on all aspects of non-traditional threat is a matter of debate. One option is to have subcommittees allotted to the China Study Group, because China Study Group again has got people from all walks of life. So you could have subcommittees working on the non-traditional threats and presenting it to the China Study Group, who could in turn present it to the Cabinet Committee on Security. So here the process is something which the government can decide as to what kind of a process they want to do. But what I'm hinting at is there is a need to put a systemic process in place so that you can predict as to what type of action you need to take in various situations in the case of a non-traditional threat. Now we come to the capability building. So the capability building is a fallout of the response that you want. So for each type of threat, you will have to be prepared and you'll have to develop capabilities to respond. Like if it is a cyber attack, so we need to have mechanisms in place to, firstly, defensive mechanisms in place which can avoid or prevent a cyber attack. And secondly, maybe offensive cyber capability by which you can nullify their attacks. So there is a need to develop for each type of threat capabilities, and capability building takes time. It's sometimes because of want of capability, your response will have to be muted. You cannot take a particular response because you don't have the capability. And some amount of capability can be built beforehand, while some can be developed once the threat is unfolding or emerging. And contingency planning is again a very important component of this development of standing operating procedure. because everything cannot be thought out, but certain things can be. Like when we plan an attack, we say, okay, company A and B is going to attack, but if the attack fails, if company A is not able to capture the objective, then company B or D will go. So the D is also incorporated into the plan ab initio, so that we are not searching for who is going to go into the attack next. So that kind of a contingency planning has to be there as part of the standing operating procedure. If a particular industry is not able to catch up, if a particular institution is not able to do its job, what is the alternative? If we are running short of doctors, running short of health and sanitation workers, so those contingency plans have to be thought out and procedures put in place so that you're cutting down on time. And we need to have these protocols at the national level and disseminate to the states and other ministries on a need to know basis, so that everybody has got the necessary tools before them to act in the case of a non-traditional threat. Let us now move to COVID-19. In fact, I just want to make, one more point here. Like people say that the armed forces of today are not the same as that of 1962. But yes, it's a question that we need to ask ourselves, are they the same that they should be in 2020? Maybe no, because you need to have spent more on defense, and the government, due to other compulsions, has not been able to spend as much as it would like on defense over a period of time. And so we are maybe not the army that we would like to be in 2020. So capability building takes time. So unless the resources are committed in terms of money, in terms of the will to get those capability going, irrespective of the government, only then the capability is built over a long period of time. All right. So now we come to COVID-19 specific capabilities that we will have to have built or build it for any future threat. Like considering that COVID-19 is actually not a deliberate threat, but a similar threat can unfold in the future. We have seen it. So, and this is a good weapon to be used irrespective of the biological weapon conventions. In this case, the COVID-19 has spread across the globe. But if China wants to target only India, so then it could have had methods by which it would send in people to enter India who are infected by the virus, and then they will be able to spread the virus amongst us. So then how do we track? First is, in this particular case, like the virus was already in China. So we should have had people in China. We have the Indian diaspora there, the Indian embassy, and the intelligence people. So we should be able to get an insight as to what is happening within China, so that even if China had not officially reported, so there's thought something of an emerging problem related to a biological threat could have been identified, and how it is being, the mode of transmission and the pace of transmission could have been identified in advance. The government guidelines for action to be taken by the state government, ministries, institutions based on the thresholds, including testing, tracing, and tracking. So these kind of guidelines could be thought out by the study group based on the thresholds that each ministry offers, and guidelines can be issued in advance. In this particular case, the Prime Minister, of course, were holding regular meetings with all the state governments, with the medical fraternity, with the economic people and the industry people, and issuing orders on on a monthly basis, so to say, based on the progress of the COVID-19. Similarly, identifying industries for catering for medical equipment. So if the study was done beforehand, we would be nominating industries who could produce like equipment like PPE, ventilators, more of ICU beds, so that you're ready for the pandemic as it unfolds. So how can we do it? Say if the study team says, okay, about 1% of my population is likely to be impacted based on whatever mathematical models they would develop, and then they would say, okay, that is the kind of effect this pandemic will have, which means about 1 crore people. So if I have to cater for 50% of the requirement, so then the medical fraternity can then work out, okay, 50 lakhs people I have to cater for. So how many ICU, how many ventilators I will need, how many PPEs I will need in advance. And that 50% requirement, even if it works out to say 20 lakhs or whatever, spread across the country in the NDRF nodes or in the government hospitals or institutions, would help in mitigating the initial requirement that would come about. And this, of course, stock needs to be reviewed every year so that the condition of the stocks is maintained well, so that it doesn't happen that when the pandemic actually unfolds, they are not in a state fit enough to be used. And of course, once you have this kind of infrastructure in place, you can easily export these to other countries and make it a profitable venture. And you should have protocols in place for employing doctors, which we saw was a major problem, is continuing to be a major problem. And with the number of cases, if it increases, the pressure on the doctors is certainly going to increase. And so you have to have protocols in place where even doctors having private practices are able to chip in. And we need to maintain a data bank at the national level so that from the time a student finishes his MBBS till the time he's practicing or working, he should be mandated to put his hands on the deck when such a pandemic is there. So a similar database is required for healthcare workers and paramedics, and even maybe sanitation workers and all that. So this kind of a work can be done in advance, and data can be available with the ministry, so that in the event when these people need to be called up, you are having all the data ready with you, so as to call up on these people to help out in the case of a pandemic. This is one aspect, the Ayush aspect. Maybe we have been a little slow in it. India is actually very good as far as the alternate medicine is concerned, and we have not propagated it enough. So maybe we need to identify various medicines or methodologies and get necessary clearances beforehand through ICMR or WHO, and so that once a particular pandemic or a disease is breaking out, you have a particular medication ready. So this has to be done in consonance with the next bullet, where I'm saying we should have biotech labs or universities to study future mutation patterns of coronavirus and find antibodies. Finding vaccines may be difficult because you have to put them through human trials and all that. But certainly, once you identify the strain of a particular virus, then you will be able to accordingly find out what is the antibody which will act and prevent the spread of the virus in the human body, and maybe have that particular intellectual knowledge, laboratory knowledge in place, so that thereafter the industrialization or mass production of it and the trials, the time can be saved and valuable lives can also be saved. There has to be guidelines issued for roles by the business houses, NGOs, religious institutions, because all these people also have their hospitals, they have their hostels, so they will be able to contribute effectively, and we can use their facilities also in the case of such a pandemic to quarantine people, to hospitalize people, and things like that. But you need to have guidances in place, and we have enough professionals who are doctors, who are nurses, who have retired, but they are available for any requirement in the case of such a pandemic. And we have to, of course, it's a national resource, so there has to be no differentiation between a state and a center. That line has to be made very clear. So in terms of schools, colleges, hostels, everything, we need to utilize all the resources that are available across the country. Like in the case of schools, if you want to use the school for a quarantine facility, but it may not have enough toilets to cater for the people who are going to be housed there. So then you need to earmark somebody who is going to put up those toilets there. You have to earmark an agency who's going to put up. If the agency is going to put up toilets, then you need to have sanitation workers in place who need to clean it up. Now you are doing all this on the fly, and there have been complaints, like even the railway compartments which have been modified are being used as quarantine facilities. There are complaints that the hygiene of those is very poor. So again, we are reacting to the situations, and we need to have all this planned in advance and documented, so that we are not racing against time when the need arises. Another important aspect is in the involvement of paramilitary, police, and defense services. The defense services and police, they all have got a very good command and control setup all across the country. And so, like in the case of, I would take an example of the movement of migrant workers. So the defense services, other than, of course, the need for the people who are manning the borders, we have a lot of category A establishment, that is, we call the training institutions all across the country. So their locations could be utilized also for housing of COVID patients, or I'm taking the example of COVID, but any patient who has been infected. And similarly, the defense services have got an excellent vehicle repair mechanism set up in place. And so when your vehicle's essential services, your truck are moving along the national highways, the defense services could be called upon to set up repair facilities along the national highways. Actually, we could even tell the civil industry to put up and mandate them to establish repair facilities along the routes. But defense services certainly have a very good setup where we can chip in. So while in this case, there is certainly a case like we had our borders in place, and during the pandemic, now we are facing a challenge along the borders. Obviously, you cannot pull out anybody from the LAC or the LOC, and we cannot touch them, and we have to make sure that they are free of the disease also. That's what the Chief of Army Staff had also said his first priority is force preservation, and which was a right thought, because of the force preservation, you are now able to fight or take stock of the situation along the borders. Otherwise, if the soldiers were infected, we would be in a bigger crisis. So, but there is a clear-cut policy to be enunciated for involvement of the paramilitary forces, police and defense services. Similarly, the banking and finance sector. So these are the people who need to do all that spade work in terms of the thresholds, the likely impact. Like I said, on July 2nd, once we decided to unlock, so it was based on the economic input that the Indian economy cannot be allowed to go down any further, and there is a need for us to unlock. Similarly, the banking and finance sectors, where they had to waive off the repayment of loans, they had to waive off repayment of EMIs. So all this could be thought of and instructions be ready in advance so that the people can be made aware of it well in time. The diplomatic impact is again very important. Your neighbors look up to you. You're a big power. So they would certainly expect you to chip in, irrespective of whatever internal politics the country faces. You have to reach out to your neighbors. It is in such grave situations that when you reach out to your neighbors, your standing in the Committee of Nations increases. And so you have to be more than benevolent and not even maybe give items on credit or even say waive off the credit, so that these countries thereafter in future will be obliged to you. And in this process, if you are to isolate China, how it is to be done needs to be documented. We have to keep updating it as time moves along, but it has to be a thought out process and not maybe in fits and jerks. Like the banning of 59 apps was just maybe I would call it a tip of the iceberg. You can actually do more, but you have to also keep in mind that you should push it only to a point where it doesn't impact your own economy, because the kind of dependence that we have on Chinese economy as on date is well known to all of you. So the economic impact and steps to revive the economy is the cornerstone of this whole process, because the country has to get back to its normal routine. And the support of the various sectors is important. The MSMEs obviously saw a little bit of relief by way of additional loans and delay in repayment of loans. The manufacturing got back with a little bit of reduced work power and different time shifts and things like that. But the getting back of tourism, hotel and transportation is going to be a big challenge. And so the country even now needs to have certain thresholds identified as to at what stage they want these industries to open up. And of course, the ultimate bottom line is the confidence of the people to use these facilities because of the current situation. So in my understanding, it will take at least another few years before your hotel, tourism and transportation industries actually get back to normal. And of course, the protocols for evacuation of the Indian diaspora. This is one aspect where I think India did well by evacuating people well in time from other countries. But then there's always a clamor for evacuation. So we need to be very clear from where we need to evacuate. And if it is a situation like now, where a particular country was infected and you're getting people back to India, it's a different story. But then if you are targeted, if India is the targeted country, so then actually very few people will want to come back to India because you are affected. So wherever they are staying, they will like to stay. In fact, there'll be more people want to go back out of India because you have been targeted and there is a pandemic unfolding only in India and nowhere else. So these things have to be thought out, and what was followed now may not be the thing that will be necessarily followed in future pandemics also. And there's a need to have strict guidelines for the media, print, visual, and social media, because there is large number of misinformation which is being put across, and the common man gets pretty much confused. He is already under tremendous pressure due to the economic impact and the kind of stresses he's undergoing. And so the government, at least in these times of crisis, needs to be more strict, irrespective of the backlash that it may have, in terms of at least the pandemic related news that is percolated to the common man needs to be fully under control of the government. So it has impacted all 54 ministries of the government: education, sports, law and justice, parliamentary affairs. Who could have imagined the High Court or the Supreme Court is now doing settling cases through video conferencing? And like in the education, like we have told earlier, taking a mobile to the school or the college was banned. It was not allowed. And now the school has entered through your mobiles. So students are now studying using their mobiles. So that is the kind of lifestyle change. Work from home has become a new normal. The industry has realized that they are wasting money on infrastructure. So in future, they may continue to work from home as far as the IT industry is concerned. So that is one particular impact. Like you see, while the health industry, they were impacted a lot. The manufacturing was impacted a lot. The IT industry actually didn't get that much of an impact. In fact, some of the IT companies did pretty well because by working from home, the output was much better than it would have been otherwise. And I can see it. Even my own relatives who are working in IT companies, they are on their desk from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. So the working hours have increased. The IT companies have actually benefited, but other ministries, they've had a huge impact. So that's why I was saying the impact on each type of ministry and each type of industry is different, which needs to be studied in depth, and there is a need to document it. And what is the ultimate aim? The confidence of the citizens to resume activities, because the government is in control of the pandemic or of the virus that has struck us. So this feeling has to be there for the common man, and only then the country will get back to normal. And finally, I would like to conclude by saying, so this kind of a systemic analysis for each type of threat and laying down of protocols and capability building is essential. Like I said, for conventional threats, this kind of an analysis is an ongoing process. We do have war games regularly. We analyze what is required, what weapon system is required, what infrastructure is required. So we do all that. But now, as we move along, this kind of a conventional warfare may not be the immediate requirement. But yes, you cannot rule it out. If a country is not able to achieve its aim by using any of these non-traditional threats, the final weapon is certainly going to be a conventional threat. And any economic power needs to have a parallel military power. You just being an economic power without adequate military support, or if you don't have your own military, you need to have an alliance like the Japan has with the USA. So you have to have your military might also in place. So you cannot negate it that you're spending unnecessarily on defense. So a systematic analysis of each type of threat and laying down protocols is essential. A 10-year perspective would be a good timeline to look at. And once you have your protocols in place, mid-course corrections by way of contingency planning would be easier. So that, like I said, if you have 50% of your equipment available ab initio, then catering for additional equipment because your industry is already geared up for it. So now they know what is to be done. So they will be able to chip in terms of either producing medicines, vaccines, or the medical equipment. And for an aspiring regional power, that is very important. Your image, you're a regional power, you're aspiring to be one. You certainly are a big power in the region. And now, mute please. So for an aspiring regional power, you need to behave in a more nuanced and in a better manner, so that the other countries who are looking at you, they are confident that India is now taking actions in a well thought out and a very coherent manner, and they are not just racing against time to catch up with the pandemic. So that is why laying down of these protocols and SOPs is a very big essential aspect. And you have enough specialists in various fields. You have retired finance secretaries, health secretaries, you have people of various specialities who are available and who can be tasked to do an in-depth study for each type of non-traditional threat. And there is certainly, like I said, the need to nominate a nodal ministry for each type of threat. And a constant review every 5 years will certainly help because you need to do a review. You cannot say, okay, I've made a particular SOP or a protocol, and that is final, because the dimensions are changing. The global geopolitical scenario is changing, and even if I talk of a biological threat, the type of viruses that would come about, maybe there would be a similar threat in Africa after about 5 years. So you have to study that and maybe revisit your own protocols and whether you have catered for all kind of contingencies. So this needs a review. And so I would only say that the aim of this particular presentation was to emphasize that there is a need for a systemic analysis for each type of non-traditional threat. Because why I came about this is, while I was doing my research also, I spoke to a lot of specialists, China specialists and even others, and I would ask them these kind of questions as to if China vetoed your World Bank loans. Okay, so how many World Bank loans are you willing to say acceptable to be vetoed? So 10 World Bank loans vetoed, do you take it as a threat? Then how do you respond? So these kind of situations are still very nebulous. You cannot actually decide on a particular course of action without giving due thought. So that is why this thought came to me, that the non-traditional threats have to be studied in a great amount of detail, and you need to have your protocols and SOPs worked out so that the country is able to take a counter action as and when required. So these were my personal views, which I've expressed, and based on inputs that are available on open source, and you may take it with whatever pinch of salt you need to. And I once again want to thank the establishment for giving me this great opportunity to speak to you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your informative analysis. We are fortunate ones that have an opportunity to talk to you and to explain this opportunity, and we will be benefited from your knowledge and your time. Over to Swagata ma'am. Swagata ma'am, am I audible?
Yeah.
Hello. Is there
Then,
is
sir,
chat box?
can you please remove your screen so that we can view you?
Hello.
Yeah, hello. Am I audible?
Yeah.
You are not audible to us.
I think I am audible.
I think you are audible, ma'am.
Yeah. Kannan sir, can you please take out your screen?
Okay.
No, we are still viewing your screen.
Okay.
Swagata ma'am, am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible. Yeah.
Is there any question in the chat box?
Yes, sir.
Or queries?
Yeah, there are a few queries, sir. First of all, I would like to thank you for such an elaborate and descriptive presentation. It was complete in every sense, because you took a lot of aspects which was related to this kind of non-traditional threat. One question is there from Dr. K.P. Singh. He has asked about the economic impact. He has said that how we will recover from it.
Somebody's mic is on.
Please mute your mic. Kannan sir, your mic is muted.
Yeah. Right. So the question, as I understand, is how this economic impact can be got over and mitigated. Okay. So like I said, it is not an easy process. Ultimately, today, like we are seeing, the number of cases are increasing and your economy is unlocking. So people have to get back to work. They will, the confidence of the common man has to come back. The various protocols which are laid down by the government has to be followed by them, the social distancing norms and other things. And people have to get back to work. So that is the basic. And for that, you need to have the confidence in the system that has been put in place by the government. And people have to abide by those regulations and work. And that is only when your economy will get back to normal. And it is not an easy process which will take place in immediate future. But yes, maybe a year or two, maybe by the end of 2021. And the one of the important inputs that would be required is vaccines, because today you have people who are asymptomatic and still they are roaming around. And today when the government is putting up figures of the rise in cases, so they are attributing it to better testing, because there were people in the system in our society who were actually infected but they didn't report. So that's why your number of cases are going up. But yes, we have to ensure that the protocols are being followed by everybody, for which the government has to be very strict and the enforcement agencies have to be very strict with ensuring that the people follow all protocols. And your economy will get back to normal only once people get back to work. And for that, availability of a vaccine is very important, and people have to be given the vaccine, even the non-infected people, so that they get back to work in a more comfortable frame of mind. So I don't see this happening before the end of 2021. So till then, we will have to work with restrictive manpower and things like that. But yes, it's a challenge that the country is facing. Thank you.
Yeah, you're right, sir. It is a big economic challenge before us. One more query we are having. We are dealing with biological threats such as COVID-19. So in future, what type of other biological threats do we foresee? Because we have to plan accordingly. Let it be plan A or plan B, unless and until we know who are the creator of these such kind of viruses or other biological weapons. So what can be other threats which you foresee?
Okay, this is, I would say, more of a technical question, because a biological threat can be created. Actually, there are enough viruses which are available. Actually, coronavirus is a huge family. It's a huge family. And similarly, rhinovirus is a huge family. And there are enough viruses which are available in animals. And there are viruses which are prevalent amongst the human beings also. But the problem comes when there is uh, I would say, transposition of a virus from an animal to a human being, or even from within human beings, the viruses which are there, they become more than active. So I will not be actually, frankly, able to name any particular virus. But yes, it is a process. It's a study which is going on in various universities also, to identify various streams. Like you had the SARS virus, so which now has come as a COVID virus. It's again, COVID is supposed to be a different strain of the SARS virus. So, but yes, because of the mutation that is taking place in the virus itself, that's why I had put one of the points as you have to nominate various labs to identify the future mutation processes of viruses, and they have to come out and identify, yes, these are the likely future strains of viruses that can impact human lives. Because otherwise, viruses are present in all of us, but your immune system is not able to react to a particular virus. That is what needs to be studied by these labs, and they have to come out with various strains of the different viruses that will impact human body. And specifically naming, sorry, I don't have that knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. So one more query is from Ankit Chuklaji. He has posted, sir, as China is one of the largest economy, and basically it is dealing with small nations with money power. So is there any way to tackle China? Please suggest some measures taking China's economic weapon into consideration.
Yeah, so this is one aspect which I amplified in the beginning.
Yeah.
That China is today taking over the world because of its economic might. It's got 3.3 trillion US dollars as foreign exchange reserve. But yes, today it is facing a problem because it gave away loans for developments of Belt and Road Initiative. It gave away loans to a large number of countries. And they were supposed to start repaying the loans. But today it's like a bank having a non-paying asset. So they've given away loans, nobody is repaying China. And China is supposed to be a economy which is based on export-oriented economy. And today it's facing another problem because there are other countries who are so, including us, who are so embroiled in the coronavirus that they are not able to place orders for the kind of products that China is manufacturing. So its export has actually dwindled. And unless it exports, it can't make the money and its profits cannot go up. So India, like one of the aspects which, like our Prime Minister said, Atmanirbhar Bharat, there is an extent to which we can actually nullify the Chinese by, I would say, we have to reach out to our own neighbors. Like the case of Iran, I can think of. Like we had promised Iran that we will make a railway line from Chabar port ahead, northwards. But then our IRCON, they didn't make it because we fell to the pressure of the US. So if we don't fall to such pressures and we execute our projects in time, the confidence of the neighbors will increase in us. We should chip in our neighbors for infrastructure development. If we can't do physical infrastructure, the digital infrastructure is a big positive as far as India is concerned. Your healthcare services, we are very strong in healthcare. We are very strong in hospitality industry. So don't know, hospitality industry will be on a low, but you can certainly, outsmart China as far as your digital world is concerned. Though yes, they are making big strides in the artificial intelligence sector, and similarly in the hospital administration and providing medical care is one big aspect where India will have to choose which particular aspects of the Chinese economy it wants to target. The complete Chinese economy it can never target. They are 7 times your size, so that is absolutely not possible. So you have to actually, as long as you can, wean away the Chinese markets by producing your own goods, which are of better quality and are cheaper, then yes, it will make an impact on China.
Yeah, thank you, sir. You're very right that China is a very big challenge before us. It's not a small challenge.
Hello.
Hello. Yes. One more
Hello.
question is from Mohammad Iqbal ji. He has asked, which factors responsible for rise of the Chinese economy, or what are the factors that are responsible for rise of the Chinese economy? I think you have covered that.
Yeah, this has been covered.
This has been covered. And I think I don't see any more question here. Everybody has praised your session like anything. It is one of the best sessions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's an honor for me.
Yeah.
May I ask you one question? May I ask
sure,
you
sure.
something? Hello?
Yeah.
Hello? Am I audible?
Yeah,
Haji,
yeah.
ma'am.
Yes. So, as we talk about the Xi Jinping, he is the most powerful man in the China. But there is some voices of opposition in the China, and it is the Chinese brain that it is difficult to read it. Then it is the pre-planned Chinese game to divert the people from the original matter. It means the voice of opposition, Xi Jinping wants to suppress the voices. And so that's why the border dispute, Galwan Valley, it's a part of their strategy. And from 1954 to 57, we have heard the slogan, Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai. And the result was in 1962, India-China war. And same thing, there is nowadays a slogan is coined in international world regarding China and Pakistan friendship. Higher than Himalayas, deeper than ocean, stronger than steel. They are having all-weather friendship. So do we hope that there will be a U-turn in their friendship like India and China's friendship?
Okay, one narrative which is like floating around is that China is doing all this to wean away the local pressure that Xi Jinping is facing. Of course, one of the major problems Xi Jinping pressure is facing is from the elite CCP themselves, because this anti-corruption drive that he initiated to remove all his opposition from his competitors, they are all actually raising a lot of slogans against him. Even if you take up the Galwan Valley incident, like China did not so far declare how many people have died, but unconfirmed reports say that about 70 to 80 Chinese soldiers have actually died in that Galwan Valley incident, where we lost 20 of our soldiers. And so China doing all this primarily to divert local media, maybe a narrative to a certain extent, but I still feel that Xi Jinping now today is looking at say 2021, which is the centenary year of the Chinese Communist Party, and 2049 is going to be the centenary of the establishment of China. So he is now looking at consolidating his position. He's only saying, I'm taking back what is rightfully mine. Why has he come to the LAC? Because he says that is the claim line that I have. I have not crossed my claim line and come into your territory. Your claim line may be somewhere else, but that's okay. You can keep doing what you want. But I am now coming to my claim line, and I am only consolidating my position. So now from wherever he is not likely to move back easily unless there is enough pressure put on him from other dimensions, economically, or you have to physically actually evict him, which is possible. It's not impossible, and you can do it. But that is a decision that the government has to take. As far as the China-Pakistan friendship is concerned, yes, it is there to stay. You have to, whether you like it or not. And in fact, I would say Pakistan is already now, China helped Pakistan out with the repaying of the debt to Saudi Arabia. So China is willing to go all the way to help out Pakistan, and that friendship will stay. And any future war is going to be positively a two-front war. You have to be prepared for it. Pakistan will certainly be involved, and in due course, I would say Pakistan may become one of the vassal states of China, with China actually sitting in Pakistani soil and calling all the shots. So that's a reality which we have to live with.
And nowadays, it's also provoking Nepal against India. It is also a matter of great concern, sir. So there are two our neighboring countries we are confronting. Okay, sir. And one more, that post-Galwangli, sir, there is an increase in cyber attacks. And we are living in the information age. So they are targeting not government institutes or other international reputations institutes, or manufacturing industries and mobile industries. Then one thing which is a matter of grave concern, that they are having access to our telecom industry, and they are having sufficient data. They may in future, they may use against us, and it may create havoc for India. So should we, the aim of our webinar is that any thought we can put forward to our government, that there may be any change or there may be any shift in their policy. So we are hopeful regarding that thing. So cyber attacks are, and they are not attacking our government institute, manufacturing, they are attacking our banking system also. And banking system, it is directly related to our citizens. And if the citizens, they are hitting the interest of citizens, then it will create so many problems for our government. So how we will check these things? Because cyber terrorism, Chinese are expert in cyber. So should we also prepare the hackers, a team of hackers? Because they are also preparing the team of hackers. They are university students, and they are giving them assigned tasks that you have to hack so many systems. They are targeting US also. They are expert in that. They are funded by PLA. So they are supported by the Chinese armies. So if there is provision in India also, we will make strong our firewalls, any solution.
Yeah, actually, there is a lot of work going on in this field. Okay, like recently there was a cyber command that has been raised in the defense services. It's a tri-services command which has been raised, which came into being in November 2019. So there is enough action taking place in that end, both for defensive and offensive cyber activities. But yes, as far as technology is concerned, even your laptops, your mobiles, all these have got enormous Chinese components. So that is one of the points when your prime minister is saying that yes, Atmanirbhar hona hai. So this is one particular field, but this is a technology in which China is a superpower. I would say in the world there is 90% or 80% of the systems in the world work on Chinese hardware. So we have to have systems in place where you can make your own hardware, you can make your own chips and put them in your mobiles, in your laptops. Otherwise, today, like you're saying, he can trigger off any virus or a Trojan in any of your systems, and then it'll impact each and every one of us. But this is a long time. That is why I said it's a capability building exercise, which will take time. But I would assure you there are actions happening in this particular field as far as cyber attacks are concerned.
In fact, China doesn't want to see India as a big power. That is the fact, sir.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for quenching our questions. Thank you, sir. Swagata Gupta, ma'am.
Hello.
Yeah, thanks, sir, for a brilliant session. Now I will hand over the platform to Durgeshwari Shah, ma'am, for further process. Yeah, ma'am.
Thank you, Gupta, ma'am.
Now it's over.
To materialize your thought, there are so many members. There are efforts of so many members, team members. So in this, our organizing this webinar, we are having so many persons. Sir, you are an army person, and we are also having a team like an army. There are principal ma'am who always supports us. Then our administrative officer, army artist marches on his stomach, and we are having full administrative support. Next, all the deans of our faculty, art faculty, science faculty, commerce faculty, Dr. Praveen Oja sir, Ashna Jain ma'am, Rashida Kanchwala ma'am, then Rikha Verma ma'am, and Sanjay Sohni sir. There are so many members, my team members, Dr. Madan Vaspil, sorry, Mangilal Vaspil sir, Dr. Meena Yadav, and last one, finally the most important, Dr. Swagata Gupta ma'am, who is the nodal officer and who is the in charge of our NAC team. She is always on her foot, get set and go. She always insists us to do something. Okay. And our principal ma'am. And finally, I would like to thank these all things are coordinated by our HOD, Dr. S.M. Salim. Ma'am, Swagata ma'am. Hello. Will Eddie sir will join us?
No, he's not joining us. He's busy
He's
with the
not
meeting.
available. So should I conclude the webinar?
Yeah.
Should I?
I
So
would like to thank each and every one of you for giving me this opportunity for presenting my views, and I hope it will be useful to many of the thinkers who have joined us from various colleges and institutions. And if we are given a chance to work out these protocols and SOPs, I'm sure we will do a good job of it. Thank you, everyone. Thanks. Thank you, ma'am.
So I am handing over the floor to Mr. Amit Sharma for offer a vote of thanks. Over to Amit, Mr. Amit Sharma. Amit, am I audible to you, beta?
Good afternoon, ma'am. You're clearly audible, and thank you for allowing me a chance to propose the vote of thanks. On behalf of Dr. S. Coordinator and Dr. the convener of this webinar, we extend this gratitude towards our honorable Brigadier Rajamani for delivering such a nice and informative.
तो मोबाइल थोड़ा सा दूर रखिएगा आपका, कमिंग हो रहा है.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Kannan sir, your valuable input to the topic were indeed has brought much clarity and deep understanding to all of us. We would also like to extend our deepest gratitude towards Honorable Additional Director of Higher Education in Vision, Dr. Suresh Silawat Sahib, for his active and motivational support, though he couldn't make up to the meeting today, but I'm sure he would have been more of a better support to us. Let me also take the opportunity to thank respected Principal Ma'am, Dr. Shobha Jain Ma'am, for providing the golden opportunity to the Department of Military Science for organizing this webinar. The successful accomplishment of this webinar is because of your active support, ma'am. We would also like to extend very special thanks, like Durgeshwari ma'am just mentioned, to our nodal officer, Dr. Swagata Gupta ma'am, and research scholar, Mr. Mohammad Yusuf ji, for their active, continuous, prompt, and up-to-date, sharp support throughout. Let us not forget to thank our technical team comprising of Mr. Pawan Patidar ji and Mr. Heman Jadam ji for uninterrupted technical support at the back end. And yes, last but not the least, we thank all our participants for showing their interest in making this webinar such a huge success by their active participation. Once again, special thanks to all the dignitaries, faculty members, guests, and participants. We hope that in future also we'll come up with more of such ventures. Thank you once again. Over to Durgeshwari Shah, ma'am. Thank you so much once.
Thank you, Amit. Thanks, Amit. Now, with the permission of principal, should I conclude the session? Should I session to declare over? Hello, Swagata ma'am?
Yeah, sure. Sure, ma'am. Sure.
Can I declare the session over with the permission of principal ma'am? Okay. The session is over. I declare the session over. Over and
Yeah, thank you, Durgeshwari ma'am. Admin ji,
जी मैम
yeah,
ओके ओके
we all will be leaving this.
Thanks to admin, Pawan Paridar sir and all the teams. They are always with us. Without their support, it will don't run smoothly. Okay,
Okay.
thank you,
Thank
Paridar
you,
sir.
thank you, thank you, ma'am. Okay.
Pawan bhai, और